Contemporary Topics 3, Advanced Academic Listening and Note-Taking Skills, 3rd edition, by David Beglar and Neil Murray. Series Editor, Michael Rost. Copyright 2009 Pearson Education Incorporated. All rights reserved. The use of this audio program for the purpose of copying, transforming, or adapting in any manner, in whole or in part, is strictly prohibited without prior consent of Pearson Education. CD1. Unit 1. Communications Studies. Slang and Language Change. Page 3. Build your vocabulary. 1.
Attitudes towards slang vary widely. While some people approve of it, others are neutral or disapprove of it strongly.
2.
Language never stays the same for long. It's constantly changing.
3.
Slang helps us to construct friendships by showing others that we speak their language and are therefore part of their group.
4.
The world is continually evolving thanks to the development of new and better technology.
5.
Young people play an important role in expanding language by adding a variety of slang and new meanings.
6.
People often try to create an identity for themselves by wearing a particular style of clothing or speaking in a certain way.
7.
Many people think that a desire to be different is an inevitable part of teenage development, a natural phase teens can't avoid.
8.
Language is a fascinating and unique phenomenon. How human language distinguishes us from other animals has been studied for years.
9.
For some people, teenagers' use of slang and other forms of bad language reinforces the idea that they are rebellious and do not want to conform.
10.
The use of slang was not always as widespread as it is today. Nowadays, most people use it quite freely.
Unit 1. Communications Studies. Slang and Language Change. Page 5. Try it out.
So, we know that people adjust the way they speak for a number of different reasons. First, they simply want to say something about themselves. They want to create a certain impression on whomever it is they're talking to, or perhaps influence them. Then there's the context. We all change our language according to the situation we're in, where we are, and who our audience is. For instance, if we're in an interview, we're going to sound different than if we're chatting with a friend, say. Next, people change their language in order to fit in. When we want to feel accepted by a certain group, we try to speak like the members of that group. And last, there's the entertainment factor. We sometimes adjust the way we speak simply because we can. We are free to play with language and be creative with it. And we enjoy that.
Unit 1. Communication Studies. Slang and Language Change. Pages 6 and 7. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
The first thing to say about language change is it's inevitable. Language is a living thing, constantly expanding, evolving, and adapting to the humans who use it. We see language change in all areas of language: syntax, phonology, orthography, and semantics. For now, let's just focus on semantics and on one particular area of semantic change which always grabs people's attention: slang. We all recognize slang, we all use slang, and we use it for a reason. It gives our language a special feel and says something about us. So I'm going to talk a bit about what slang is, who uses it and why, where it comes from, and how it is received. So, what is slang? Here's a definition you might want to jot down. Slang is informal language which tends to be associated with particular groups of people and therefore helps define their identity. Slang often breeds among deprived groups or groups we think of as secretive or underground or non-conforming. Today, though, these associations are becoming much weaker, and now everyone uses slang. So, let me home in on this idea of identity as it leads us into the question of why people use slang. A lot of slang comes from people not wanting to be understood by those outside their group. We typically think of using language in order to be understood, but another use of language is to prevent understanding. People use exclusive or private language to give their group a distinct identity. With slang, people can tease one another, enjoy shared experiences, and keep everyone else at a distance. All cultures have groups or subcultures who want to be separate, and yet they want people to know who they are and what they stand for, and slang helps to construct that identity. We can say then that slang reflects the experiences, beliefs, and values of its speakers. By using the slang associated with a particular social group, you're staking a claim to membership of that group. Being in group denotes inclusion or acceptance because you play by the group's rules. Being out group is the opposite. It's being excluded. Ever notice how non-native speakers are so eager to learn slang even before they have a basic grasp of the language? Well, that's because it's a signal of integration, of membership. I speak this language, I belong. In a word, slang is cohesive. Now, let's look at the personal benefits of using slang. First, when you use slang well, you show that you're in tune with the times, that you know what is culturally in fashion, and you're part of it. Using slang makes you desirable. The second benefit of using slang is that you demonstrate your mastery of the situation. You become an expert. This is because slang is only used in certain settings, and knowing how and when to use it, or when not to use it, gives you a kind of status. A third benefit of using slang is that it allows you to share social and emotional experiences, so it reinforces your relationships. For example, if you say to your friend, "My new sound system is really safe," you're saying more than just, "It's very good." Your use of slang equates sharing an emotional experience. And a fourth benefit of using slang is, it's fun. It's often humorous and very creative, like poetry. The semanticist S.I. Hayakawa actually described slang as the poetry of everyday life. In other words, slang is also a form of play or entertainment. So, what are the major inspirations for slang? Well, there are a few that never seem to go out of fashion. I'm talking about love and romance. It's also used for emotional expressions of like and dislike, and you can probably think of dozens of them. These particular slang terms seem to have a pretty short life. They're being replaced by newer words and phrases all the time, and like I said, if you want to stay cool, you've got to keep up with the changes. But there's another category of slang term that's really taken off recently, and that's the slang of new technology. Things like personal computers, the internet, email, and mobile technology. These things have become one of the richest sources of slang, and there are tons of websites designed to celebrate or decode that slang. Here we see certain, often youthful communities using this to distance themselves from the technologically challenged older generations. So, we've seen what slang is, who uses it and why, and what inspires it. But what about the present-day attitudes towards it? Well, slang may be widespread and no longer taboo in the way it once was, but that doesn't mean everybody likes it. Some see it as decadent and insist on associating it with groups they see as undesirable or uneducated. They see themselves as guardians of the language and view any kind of change as change for the worse. In my opinion, this is absurd. I personally think slang is a sign of life, vibrancy, and beauty in language. As I said at the outset, language is a living thing and will always change. Yet, it seems like people are programmed to view any language change negatively. Okay, so I'd like to summarize now today's main points with a quotation from linguist Tony Thorne, who says, "Slang often performs an important social function, which is to include into or exclude from the intimate circle." So, yes, it may still have negative connotations, but slang is here to stay. It even has taken on an aura of respectability by becoming the subject of serious academic study. And why not? As I've tried to show, it's a fascinating social and linguistic phenomenon.
Unit 1, Communication Studies, Slang and Language Change. Page 8. Talk about the topic. Parts A and B.
It was an interesting lecture, but I have to say, I found a couple of parts confusing.
Really? Like what?
Well, he said that language change is inevitable, right?
Yeah, it's like a living thing. I guess that means all living things develop, change, you know?
Okay, and that we can't stop change from happening. Is that how everyone took it?
So far we're with you.
But later he seemed to say that groups choose to change language. That is, they use slang because they want to make a statement or create their own identities.
Yeah, okay. So what's the confusion?
Well, presumably, if they can choose to change language by using slang, that means they can also choose not to use it, right? And if they can choose not to use it...
Then they're not changing. They're choosing not to change the language. It's a choice, you're saying. I see your point.
Thank you. So, isn't that a contradiction?
No, I don't think so. What he meant was that language change will happen generally, that there will always be events, groups, or someone out there playing with the language, creating slang.
Right. Maybe it's because communication requires us to adapt to new conditions. So we change the language to adapt. That's the inevitable part. It's going to happen. History shows us that.
Oh, okay.
But it isn't inevitable in any particular group or in any particular case. You're right about that. Individuals have a choice about how they speak.
Makes sense?
Yeah. I think I get it now. Hey, thanks guys. That was a sweet explanation.
Unit 1, Communication Studies, Slang and Language Change. Take the unit test. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1. In what order does the speaker talk about the topic? 2. Which area of language is slang associated with? 3. In defining slang, how does the speaker describe it? 4. What does slang show? 5. What are 2 personal benefits of slang? 6. The semanticist Hayakawa called slang the poetry of everyday life. What did he mean? 7. The speaker says that some people see themselves as guardians of the language. What does he mean? 8. How does the speaker feel about slang? 9. Which of these 4 people would you expect to use slang most? 10. What is the lecture mainly about? Unit 1, Communication Studies, Slang and Language Change. Page 10. Extend the topic. Part A.
Hi, I'm Jackie Giopoulos, and I'm in Palo Alto, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley. You know, since instant messaging technology hit the market, its popularity has spread like crazy. And with the growth of cell phone messaging, it's now estimated that around 80 million Americans IM regularly. And it's changing how we talk. It's created a slang all of its own. We're all familiar with the IM slang LOL, laugh out loud, and TTYL, talk to you later. But let's ask these skateboarders what other slang they use. We have Sam and Stephanie. Sam, what are some of the other expressions you use?
Well, there's JK, which means just kidding. And I use BBL quite a bit, which is be back later.
And Stephanie, what about you?
Oh, I'm always using LLS, love you like a sister, and OMG, which is oh my gosh. And TTYLGF is kind of fun with your female pals. It means talk to you later, girlfriend.
Okay. So, can you two give some examples of IM slang that have crossed over into speech? For example, I just found out that book means cool. Why is that?
Well, it's basically the fact that when you type the words book and cool on a cell phone typepad, you use the same keys, so like one can mean the other.
Oh, and I've got another one. When you type 1, the less than symbol, 3, and you on a typepad, it looks like I heart you. In other words, I love you. On Valentine's Day, everyone was going around saying, I less than 3 you. It was fun.
Yeah, that's funny. That story made me ROFL. That's roll on the floor laughing. And on that note, it's back to the studio.
Unit 2, Child Psychology. The Genius Within. Page 13. Build your vocabulary. 1.
Saki is unusually alert for a 6-month-old baby. She seems to notice everything around her.
2.
Zoe has an aptitude for sports. She learns very quickly and very well.
3.
Carlos has devoted himself to learning how to play the cello.
4.
Some children exhibit extraordinary talent at a young age.
5.
Children with a good imagination can write interesting stories.
6.
I noticed several inconsistencies in his words and behavior.
7.
Most children have a natural motivation to explore the world around them.
8.
A predominant characteristic of most children is that they are curious about the world.
9.
One learning strategy that some talented children use is to do the same activity in several different ways.
10.
Once we discover the underlying principles of an event, we can understand why it happens.
Unit 2, Child Psychology. The Genius Within. Page 15. Try it out.
Okay, now it's important to understand that there are many kinds of special talents. For example, the ability to do math, the ability to dance, and the ability to sing are quite different from one another. In addition, some special talents, such as leadership ability, are very general because they involve such a wide range of skills. On the other hand, other talents are fairly specific and narrow. An example would be the ability to play a musical instrument well. For instance, a guitar. One more example would be the ability to do mathematics. Great talent for mathematics doesn't necessarily mean that the person has great talent in other areas.
Unit 2, Child Psychology. The Genius Within. Pages 16 and 17. Listen for main ideas and listen for details.
Let me begin by asking you to think about someone you believe is exceptionally talented. Someone you were in school with or someone in your own family. Okay, have you thought of someone? Now my question to you is, how did that person become so talented? Were they born that way? Were they a fast learner? Did they seem to love learning? Were they unusually alert and curious? My guess is that your answer to most of these questions is yes. Well, today I'd like to talk about children who are very talented. Children often referred to as gifted. And I'll talk about 3 points concerning this topic. First, I'll explain how these gifted children are identified. Second, I'll talk about some of the personality characteristics of these children. Third, I'll talk about how these gifted children approach learning. They have very good learning strategies that all of us can learn to use. All right, let's move on to the first point. Now, how would you identify a gifted child? Think of when you were in elementary school or high school. I'm sure that you knew some students who exhibited exceptional talents. Maybe they were particularly good at sports, mathematics, or arts. They were easy to notice, right? Well, see if these ideas make sense to you. First, giftedness is partly the result of untrained natural abilities. You could call this an aptitude for something. So when we see a very young child who shows above average athletic ability, for example, we often conclude that the child has an innate ability for sports. Now, I just said above average ability. And that's a second thing that we notice, the quality. The child's performance is special because it's surprisingly good, particularly when we consider the child's age. For instance, a 6-year-old who could play Mozart's sonata in D major would be considered gifted. The third way we can identify children is by the speed at which they learn. They generally learn faster, make fewer mistakes, make the same mistake fewer times, and need less practice than other children. Some psychologists believe that this third point, speed of learning, is perhaps the best indicator that a child has special abilities. Now, I'd like to highlight some personality characteristics of gifted children. Of course, gifted children have many types of personalities. So what I'm going to describe here are characteristics that are often but not always found in gifted children. For one, gifted children are often very intense. When they do something, especially something they enjoy, they devote all their energy and determination to it. They can concentrate for a very long time. Secondly, they tend to have high energy levels. When they are young, they are constantly moving, and this degree of physical energy is often matched by a similar amount of mental and emotional energy. Their minds are always in motion, always thinking, always looking for the next interesting puzzle to solve. A final predominant characteristic is that they are often idealistic about the world, the people they know, and their environment. They can be perfectionists, especially where their own work is concerned. Okay, now let's look at some of the ways that gifted children approach learning something. Practical strategies that you and I can try. The first approach is related to motivation. Gifted children appear to be intensely curious about any and every topic. They typically don't care whether the knowledge or skill is useful or not. A second trait is that they are observant and they notice many details about things. This allows them to thoroughly understand whatever they are studying and to notice any inconsistencies. Finally, they want to know the inner workings of things, so they are very interested in causes and effects. In other words, they want to know the underlying principles and use those principles for making generalizations and predictions about the thing they are studying. I might also add here that they enjoy using their imagination. Now let's pause a moment to think of what I've just said here about approaches to learning. Gifted children are motivated, they are alert and observant, they concentrate intensely, they try to understand cause and effect relationships, and they make an effort to think creatively. How well could you and I learn to do something if we approached it like I just described? my guess is that we could do pretty well.
Unit 2, Child Psychology, The Genius Within, page 18. Talk about the topic, parts A and B.
You know, the lecture actually reminded me of this idea called the 10,000 hour 10-year rule. Has anyone else heard of it?
Oh yeah, I have. It says something like you have to study something or practice something really hard for either 10,000 hours or 10 years to become really great at something.
Whoa, well that's encouraging. That means that I just have to study English for another 5 years to be really good at it?
Well, I have to say, I found it a little surprising that the instructor really didn't talk about, or she didn't really emphasize, that the importance of innate talents more.
Like talents that we're born with? I don't know, for like music and literature, art, science.
Yeah.
I think she actually did cover that, in a way. I think she just wanted to stress the parts of genius that we can control, kind of like being motivated, being curious, or creative when you approach something.
Okay, but you have to acknowledge the innate part is a huge factor. I mean, look at Mozart and his innate talent for music, or Emily Dickinson and her innate talent for literature. You think anyone can do what they did just by being curious or practicing a lot?
No, you're right. They had talents, but they built on them. I mean, Mozart, he practiced for hours. His father forced him.
So he was born with talent, but he had to work really hard to develop it.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of working hard, maybe we should get back into our notes. All right, so how do I identify a gifted child?
Unit 2, Child Psychology, The Genius Within. Take the unit test. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
What is the main idea of the lecture?
2.
Which of the following topics does the speaker not talk about?
3.
What is meant by untrained natural abilities?
4.
What is one way to identify a gifted child?
5.
Which of the following can we infer about giftedness?
6.
What is the best indicator of giftedness?
7.
Which of the following is probably true about gifted children?
8.
Why are gifted children often able to notice inconsistencies?
9.
Why do some gifted children want to understand cause and effect relationships?
10.
What is the speaker's attitude toward gifted children?